Ontario's government is taking aim at whether cities install bike lanes. As Lisa Shing tells us, the province says it's all about easing traffic, but others see it differently.
Bike lanes line this busy road in Toronto's West End, and they're dividing the community.
I think it's nice to have bike lanes. It's nice to that people have access to them, but it's annoying for parking being someone that has to drive all day.
What are you seeing on a daily basis?
Congestion.
I recognize the Minister of
The
Transportation.
debate has made it all the way to the Ontario legislature, the government, tabling a new bill that, once passed, would force municipalities across the province to get permission before installing any new bike lanes and prove they won't make traffic worse. The PCs also say it gives them the power to remove existing ones.
We want to bring a reasonable approach to this. We've seen traffic at an all-time high. It's congested.
The opposition doesn't see it that way.
To Doug Ford, this might be cheap politics, but to people across the province, this is the kind of politics that plays with people's lives.
Bike lane debates are playing out in other Canadian cities too, like Ottawa and Montreal, with frustrated drivers stuck in traffic and cyclists wanting a safe way to get around.
We're competing for limited, scarce space, and it's not just the space, it's also our time.
This infrastructure planning professor says bike lanes can slightly increase travel times for vehicles, but points out other factors like construction can also slow down traffic.
I have an idea. Don't drive. Commute. Use public transit. Your access to your vehicle doesn't undermine or override the community's access to safe transportation. Your car, sorry, I forgot. We're talking about Ontario. I'm sorry. I've lived in Montreal too long. But no, I haven't. But yes, that's Ontario for you. Like, how could you, the whole idea of a community, right? Of a city and a community is to ensure safe transportation. In places like where I live, they actually use this type of de-incentivizing legislation on people who drive cars, not cyclists.
And he says more data is needed.
As we get further into the suburbs, the impacts start to become more mixed, and we do need to study those and make sure that they're being well designed.
Political analysts say there might be another reason for bringing up bike lanes now that Doug Ford's government could be gearing up for an election, trying to get votes where they count most. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Yeah, Ford's push here to remove bike lanes is less about traffic or safety and more about political strategy. Ford's claims that bike lanes cause traffic congestion and hinder emergency services lacks any type of substantial backing of any type of proof or anything like that. In fact, Toronto's emergency services hasn't raised any concerns about bike lanes, so it doesn't make any sense. But the thing is that Ford's real aim here is it's a calculated political play. It's culture war, but on cyclists. It's like urbanist culture war. By focusing on bike lanes, Ford is appealing directly to his suburban, rural voter base who often see urban infrastructure changes like bike lanes as inconvenience that worsen traffic. It's, oh, I got to come to the city and deal with those cyclists. And it's that this attempt to remove them, especially on major roads like Bloor Street and University Avenue, which University Avenue is a disaster, a death trap. I lived on it. I lived on Avenue Road, just north of University. It is a horrible place to live. People got killed walking and cycling in the 3 years that I lived there on numerous occasions at that intersection at St. Clair and University. Extremely dangerous spot. So anyway, these attempts to remove these bike lanes position him as the politician who is standing up to a big bike and standing up for frustrated drivers, even though this narrative lacks any type of support from transportation data or the people who live in the cities, right? So it's this move that's aimed to, it's timed ahead of the next provincial election and will align with a familiar tactic that is to appeal to suburban voters frustrated while vilifying urban progress as a threat to convenience. This is why he takes off the fees for licenses. He takes off the tolls. It's all to appeal to drivers and to urban voters and suburban voters. And it's this strategy that relies on reinforcing an anti-city rhetoric. And it frames urban planning, particularly environmentally friendly initiatives, as elitist and impractical, which is what's really dividing the electorate. No, yeah, you won't catch me biking downtown here. Yeah, I mean, I specifically remember biking downtown on Yonge Street shortly before I moved, and I was so like I almost died like 6 times, and it was just like this city is what? It's a miracle that people aren't killed every day on a bike. I'm sure that someone is injured severely every day on a bike in Toronto. Like I'll guarantee that might sound a little bit excessive. Maybe not in the winter, but even like on mild days, I don't know. So yeah, this attempt by Ford to, what he's saying is like shifting these bike lanes to side streets. It mirrors the same thing that Rob Ford's, the approach that he had when he was mayor of Toronto. And it is this quote unquote solution, little to nothing to address the safety or accessibility concerns that cyclists have who will rely on these direct routes through major city arteries. It's less about improving infrastructure and more about creating a social issue that plays into the hands of his political supporters. And it is these types of things that is able to make it so that you don't necessarily have to be a conservative to be anti-bike. You might see yourself as a progressive and fucking have the same type of flag that I have right here, but you might want to also run over cyclists, right? And so it's a perfect little game that he can play where he's not playing like Trump culture war, but it's a specific type of culture war that works perfectly for his brand of progressive conservatism. And it is critics that rightly point out that it is this approach that reeks of overreach and undermines local municipal authority, which he is going to run into. And then he's going to do the "aw shucks, put his arms up" thing that will then make him seem like a defiant figure. And he's had a long history of meddling in these city level decisions. He's always had an issue with Toronto. He is the premier of Toronto. He governs the province like he's governing Toronto. And it's a flex. That's what it is. And it's going to backfire. Like I've said numerous times, Ford is probably going to go down for some corrupt thing at some point between now and the next federal election, which will alienate all of his supporters to then probably get us a liberal Ontario government with Bonnie Crombie. And it will be the same thing like we saw just earlier at the beginning of the show with New Brunswick. They'll flip Ontario red because of Ford being a criminal, allegedly. And yeah, it's going to backfire. It will create this unnecessary bureaucracy, and it will waste a ton of public funds, which will likely be siphoned towards private interests, which will then be another scandal. And how much money removing bike lanes will be to only then put them back. And I lived on Suburban. They removed the bike lanes and then they put them back even more advanced than they were before they got rid of them. Like Rob Ford got rid of them. Tory put them back. And when Tory put them back, they were in a better state than they were before Ford got rid of them. Ford's stance on bike lanes is just a political distraction, and it's aimed at gaining votes and votes from the folks. And it's more votes from the folks than offering genuine solutions to traffic or any type of urban planning challenges or anything like that. I'm surprised he hasn't already with all the scandals. I think the only reason that he hasn't is because he fed John Tory to the wood chipper, essentially, which saved him. And it's that thing where there's probably elements like the RCMP investigating him. The RCMP probably has like more so taking directive. This is circumstantial or hearsay, but if the RCMP is overseeing his investigation, then there's federal oversight on that, which then makes it so that they can time it out so that when Ford goes down, he goes down at a time that is beneficial for everyone. If you want to, like, how did Ford get in power? He cooed the previous leader of the Conservative Party, the exact same thing is going to happen. And then what it's going to do, very likely, is then put a redeemed Liberal Party in control. If that happens between now and the next federal election, so between now and almost next year, so because the federal election is probably a year from right now, between now and then, I think that Ford will go down and probably might even trigger another provincial election before the federal election, which, again, the same thing that happened where they turned Toronto, which had a conservative mayor for a very long time, to now a quote, I know that she's a neoliberal freak, but she's more aligned with the Liberals than she is with the Conservatives. Okay. Let's see what else they covered here.
Right here on The National.